Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lead Seat. I'm Dr. Marilyn Clark, and I am the president and founder of Clark Consulting Group. At Clark Consulting Group, we are an employee development firm that does anything from entry-level management all the way up to executive-level coaching. Today, my guest is Lisa Williams. Welcome, Lisa. Thank you for joining me today. And Lisa, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure, Marilyn, and thank you so much for having me in this wonderful venue. I have worked for about 25 years for Dow Inc., but I think my background really starts from my early beginnings here, growing up in Texas, with a very, very strong family structure on both sides of my family, everything from workers, kitchen workers to restaurateurs and grocery store owners. So I had a lot of different examples in my very young life. And those examples were very encouraging to me. And as I moved into my academic career and corporate career, I had really, really good beginnings of understanding leadership. And I think that's what's made me passionate about leadership, but also passionate about finding ways to help others find their leadership passion and growing and developing it, which is part of the reason why I'm here today to share some of that story with you.
Great, great. Thank you, Lisa. Our topic today, Lisa and I talked a little bit about this, and we came up with what we're going to call the slow burn. And what the slow burn means is reinventing yourself after a long career stretch. So I have some categories that, and Lisa, I have some questions that I want to ask you around this. And please give us all the examples and tips that could help my audience out here. So the first category is career reflections. So what are the most significant highlights and achievements of your career?
The one that often jumps out for me, as I said, I've been working for 25 years, about 8 years ago, and this is an experience with an employee resource group. So I've led one of our employee resource groups, the Global African Affinity Network at Dow for many, many years. I was a member as soon as I joined the company. And we were at a very pivotal moment with ERGs in the company. They've been around for a long time, but they were going into a bit of a lull. And we were still experiencing major problems recruiting and maintaining and developing underrepresented minority talent. So a few of the leadership and I recognized we were in a moment where our CEOs were about to transition, and CEOs love to leave legacies behind. And we were able to highlight this issue across the underrepresented minorities in the company, and recognizing that African Americans were the most disparate, I suppose, group in the company. We lobbied for a conference to bring together our Black talent in the company with the most senior executive leadership to talk about vision, corporate strategy, and the importance of investing in developing this particular employee talent pool. And it was amazing. I had to lead a team of employees and leaders at all levels, and we were only given about 8 weeks to pull off a conference, an intercompany conference that would essentially take 6 months anywhere else and any other time. But we were trying to take advantage of some timing with the board of directors. This was a conference of 400 people, 50 plus executives and senior leaders, 4 days in Houston, Texas. It was amazing. I mean, the logistics of doing all of that in 6 weeks, delivering a solid program, delivering a good message, a constant parade of excellent speakers and innovators, and giving insight that's also inspirational. After that conference, the employee resource groups in Dow were essentially reborn. Because not only did we focus on this target audience, but we invigorated them as well. And from that conference, the corporation named a chief inclusion officer for the first time in history. We had a new global supply diversity program that was launched. We reinvigorated the ERGs and their purpose and their contribution in the company and how they would become more like business resource groups, in addition to being employee resource groups going forward to drive their additional value. And we reinvigorated our partnerships with 5 historically Black colleges and universities, evolving from that about $10 million of contributions over about the next following 4 or 5 years. So it and that movement is still happening in the company. I had to be at the center of that. And I had to lead a lot of people, and we're led by a lot of people in that very, very short time frame. But that was 20 years of history culminating into a moment and recognizing how to take advantage of that moment for the greater good, and being focused and visionary and inspiring and all those good things that get into people's head and heartstrings to make them want to act and change a culture and do different. And just last week, our company was named as one of the best places to work in the country.
Congratulations.
And it absolutely has to do with the Employee Resource Group Evolution, which was started at this conference in 2017, in my opinion.
Wonderful. Wonderful. That is memorable and impactful career reflection. Now, Dow is considered in what industry? What industry is Dow considered?
Yes, we are chemical manufacturing and material science innovation.
Okay. And I know you've been there, you said over 20 years. So how have you seen the industry evolve over the course of your career?
Oh, wow. Well, at Dow, many companies like Dow, we have actually not many companies like Dow. I take that back. We have been really, really good at reading the tea leaves of how our industry has been evolving, from basic chemical manufacturing to specialty chemicals, evolving into automotive, the automotive industry, and plastics. We are the best in plastics manufacturing and plastic circularity, and continuing that journey, and a launch into now the sustainability era, as I like to call it, the new part of industry 4.0. As we digitize, as we evolve, we have to do it in a much more sustainable way. And Dow, once again, is leading the forefront on plastic circularity and water conservation, reducing our carbon footprint. But it's honestly, it's the way I've watched this company and the people in the company, leaders in the company, understand when we needed to evolve and pivot and make a change, still carrying forth, our core values and the core fundamentals of an elemental chemical manufacturing and chemistry that allow us to bring forth the innovations to the world. Everything you see around you, Marilyn, everything that you touch, in things that help evolve our world, infrastructure, electronics, Dow's products are somewhere in those things. So we've been able to look at the world and how it's evolving and make sure that we not only have a position in it, but a leading position in it. But that's just the chemicals, right? And that's just the products. It is truly the people who have made this place as resilient and as productive and successful as we've been. I have been a great beneficiary of that, but also a great contributor into that. So just watching companies fall by the wayside. Last year, we celebrated 125 years in this industry. There are not a lot of companies out there that can say they've been around and prosperous and successful for 125 years. So we take a lot of great pride in that.
Yeah. Okay. Next, I want to ask you a little bit about challenges you may have had over the course of your career. So what are some of the most challenging aspects of your role, and how did you navigate those? How do you navigate those?
In my core role, I would say I like to talk about the importance of having a meaningful personal network.
Okay.
And I remember the first few years of my career, I set a goal for myself. Now, in undergraduate, I was in the National Society of Black Engineers, which is the most professionally run student organization in the world. They taught us all about networking and mentoring and having a really good career. And this is when we were in college, right? Planning for a really good career. And part of that was meaningful and intentional networking. And we're talking about the late 90s, early 2000s, before the smartphones, before the internet was proliferated everywhere. So finding people in your company and getting to know them was really limited to your inner circle, right? Wherever you worked. But I knew as long as I had email and a telephone, that didn't have to be the case. And for in the first 3 years of my career, I set a goal that I would know someone in the company. And back then, I think our company had maybe 55 to 60,000 employees globally. I set a goal for myself that I would know someone in every region, every business, and every function.
Okay.
So if you take those 3 slices and matrix them, you know someone somewhere in every part of the company. And I did that because I knew if I ever got into a role or a situation where I didn't know what to do, I always had someone to call. That made me one of the most resourceful employees at my age, so early in my career, that I knew, or that most of my leaders knew, which certainly helped me in my career. But it is that network and that skill to intelligently and intentionally build your network and realize that it is a two-way street, right? You feed into it as you also receive from it. That has been the shining light in some of the darkest, most difficult points of my career, whether it's I didn't know what I was doing, or I didn't understand the assignment, or I understood the assignment and was actually delivering a good result, but perhaps the team or the leadership around me wasn't necessarily on board for some reason. So now you're dealing with, it could have been personality differences, priority differences, politics, anything that I have encountered in the organization. I have always been able to go back and tap into that network and break through towards a solution. That has, in my most challenging times, it has been my network. And because I fed into it, it's okay to receive from it because you don't feel like you're using the network and using people. It has been pivotal in my success and a lot of times my sanity.
Right. Networking is about giving and getting. It's a two-way street. That's for sure. I can attest to that in my career as well. My next question for you, Lisa, is there any specific challenge or setback that taught you a valuable lesson, and what was that lesson?
Yes, a few years ago, I had a role that was actually downsized, right? The role was eliminated. And I was told that because I was considered valuable to the organization, that we would find another role for me, right? And it was a blow. Anytime an organization restructures and your role is eliminated, and the first thing you immediately think is, well, what did I do? But I was smarter than that. So as soon as that bad thought came into my head, I immediately realized, no, it's not you, Lisa. The organization truly is reorganizing, because we actually lost quite a few really good people in that move, right? And while I was being told, we're going to give you another role and we'll support you in finding another role, I still understood, because I understand our HR policies, that I had a 2-year time window before that role could potentially be eliminated, right? Or I'd be trying to find another role again. And as much as I trust the leaders who were giving me this information, I also recognize that all companies are machines. They are machines. Don't take it personal, right? So I was very honest with my leader and said, I appreciate all the support and I thank you for that. I am also going to make sure I take care of myself. And this was one of the worst times in the company to also be trying to find a new opportunity. Mind you, I was also holding down 2 jobs at once because the role that was being transitioned didn't have an incoming candidate yet. And I had to go take the new role because that's where my next job would be. So for almost a year, I held down 2 roles that were not fulfilling to me in any way. They were no longer strategic to my development. I've been doing one of them for a very long time, and the other one was a lower level role that I'd done several years before. But the shining light in that example was You've just been given the worst news you could get next to being released. Okay, let's be realistic. You've just been given the worst news you could possibly get, but there's still hope. How are you going to turn this around in your favor? So I mastered the art of literally having two jobs at once, making both teams feel supported. And they were in totally different parts of the company, no less, making sure both teams felt supported by the work they were doing and the support I was giving them, that both teams had very clear goals and objectives, understood how they fit to the corporate strategy. So they always understand their place and how they're contributing, and trying to be honest with them in that I have two jobs now. I need you to be effective in your role so that I can be effective in running these two places. Basically, let's all be adults. Don't bring me any BS. Let's be smart and intelligent about this, because the healthier I can stay, the better I can serve you, the both of you.
Right.
And it made sense to everyone. Everyone was on board. They were very supportive. And I feel like, just be honest with people. Just be honest with people. And more so than not, they're going to surprise you. Like the people we have in Dow. Let me be clear. Okay. So that could have been a horrible time. I set up the fundamentals of what the job needed to do and get done, set that up so then I could go out into the company and find my next opportunity, right? Take care of your core job first, take care of you second. So in this regard, right? So once I made sure they were set up, I tapped into that amazing network, and I literally went on a personal Lisa Williams tour, armed with, at that point, 20 years of value, contribution, and delivery, cultural leadership and change in the company, lots of wonderful relationships and great projects and to deliver on and to report on. I was armed with a lot. And I went on this tour across the company for my next role. And that's when I landed into this role, which is an incredibly unique opportunity that would have never been on my radar.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. The next thing, talk a little bit about your leadership insights. And so what have been some of the leadership principles that have guided you throughout your career?
Certainly, I'd say the first one that pops to mind is integrity and respect for people. And those happen to be two of the core values at Dow, but that they speak to me. That's why I've been there for 25 years, right? I am a straight shooter, and I want to be shot straight too. So I believe in very open conversation and dialogue. I believe in being as transparent as I can, recognizing as you progress to certain leader levels, there's a certain information you can share and you can't share, right? That's just the nature of the machines that we work in. But I try to be as transparent as I possibly can, because I want to be able to trust people, and I absolutely want them to trust me. If we don't have that trust, we cannot get the job done and make the place where we work and spend a third of our lives an enjoyable and fulfilling place to be. Right. So it's those, and then caring for people. I definitely am a servant leader. I went through some really, really good leadership training through my years at Dow that helped me find those two words and understand what they mean and recognize that is part of who I am. I am a faithful person, a spiritual person, and being able to bring that part of my identity to work, I believe, fortifies me into being a stronger leader. Without those things, anything else we do is built on a house of cards, in my humble opinion.
Okay. All right. And how did you, or how do you foster a positive and productive work culture within your team and the organization as a leader? What is something you do?
Yeah, with my team, some of the first times that we meet, as soon as we are introduced, we have a new endeavor ahead of us. Either I'm coming in as a leader or we're being brought together as a project team. I propose that we talk. Let's just talk. Let's just get to know one another, right? In a way that isn't too intrusive, where we're asking for all of each other's deep, dark secrets, but Who are you? Not who you are at work, not your job, right? Who are you outside of work? Right? What do you like to do? What are your hobbies? What are your interests? What are some of the most fun or interesting things you've done in the last year or the last couple, 2 or 3 years, and vacations? I want us to talk about us as individuals first, then ask about the family, right? And the other, where did you go to school, and all those other things. I think it's important for us to talk about who we are now as adults and where we are in our lives, and use some fun reflections to open that door. And then we can evolve. And this is exactly what happened with the team I'm on. Well, all of the teams that I've been on or led, but the team I'm on right now, we've been brought together to solve a very big opportunity, solve for a really big opportunity. I'll put it that way in the company, but it's massive. It's a labor project, and it's basically trying to organize half of the labor that we use in Dow, which is contract labor. And there are a lot of dynamics to it, not just because it's people, but because it's people working on our sites that we don't really influence per se. They're influenced by the contractual agreement, but they're not Dow employees. So it was really important for us to come together and get to know one another. And I love having fun. So find a fun way to do it as well. Right. And then what happens, I think, is when you start that way as a group, you can create a ripple effect to the other groups and other teams to which you have to interact, right? I'm not saying you got to go there and have the whole circular session where you ask about who they are, whatever. And you just bring a different light to the group, and you're able to resonate in a different way that is more meaningful and more intimate, right? More trusting. Then we can start to talk about what's the problem we're trying to solve, and how are we going to get through this, and trust in the sharing of information so we could truly come up with the best solution possible. Those are some of the core elements of how I like to create a team environment. And you can do that with a small team. You can do the same thing with a large team. And I'll go back to my employee resource group examples when I was the co-chair for 2,000 employees, right? Across, at the time, it was probably 25 or 26 different chapters, right, around the world. How do you get people to connect all around the world? Well, you tap into who they are. You tap into what's important to them, and you tap into how those things are common. And once you do that, just watch the beautiful things that evolve from there. So it's worked in both settings for me.
Wonderful. Thank you. Lastly, about leadership insights, can you share any leadership lessons learned from both successes and failures?
Yes, the word that comes to mind is resilience. Because when you're successful, usually you don't get a lot of time to celebrate the success because you've been successful. So now let's move on to the next thing, right? It's how to get to the next thing.
Right.
When you're not successful in something, that takes a lot more internal energy to understand and overcome. And if you're leading a team, you've also got to help them understand and overcome it as well. And it can't stop there, right? Time does not stop in that moment, because you've got to overcome it and get through it, either to a new definition of the problem you're trying to solve, or you're going to take a new pathway, but you must continue. Not being resilient will paralyze you. And resilience is not just that word. Resilience is everything it takes to overcome that situation. Your knowledge, your grit, even your fear at times, your desire to get to that winning or that successful state, understanding the people who are on the journey with you, and how you're going to relook at whatever skills or competencies you are bringing to the table and reassess. Well, maybe I thought my skill was going to be this, but I need to change because we didn't solve the problem, right? So that resilience, you got to dig in deep and find that grit factor, which is, no matter what's happening around me, I am going to find something in me to overcome this. And then you bring all those resources together and you do it. And I love to tell people, I've never had a failure endow a project, a program, something I'm responsible for, a category, a work team. I've never had one that was not successful by the end.
Mm-hmm.
We
Okay.
may have had some downfalls in the middle, but I've never had a program that was not successful by the end.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Next, I want to talk a little bit about advice for a successor. Okay. What advice would you give to your successor or to an inspiring leader in your industry?
That's a really thoughtful question. I don't think I'd thought about before.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people succeed me in other roles, but I think as you get toward the end of your career, and that end could be still, a few years away,
Yeah.
but you've probably gone through roles or developed solutions or created teams that will stand for at least the next 10 or 15 years. You want them to sustain. If I were leaving the company in the next year or so, and I'm the team I'm with right now, and I were leaving it behind for a successor, I would tell them it is so important in this role to understand how the solution we're bringing for contract labor management fits into the future corporate strategy.
Okay.
Not what we're doing today, but where it's going in the next 5 to 7 years. Mostly because the senior executives who are trying to steer the company aren't thinking about the contract labor. They're thinking about the workforce, the employees, but they're not thinking about the contract labor. That's your job, believe it or not. And it's a space we are still creating a strategy for, so there's still a lot to learn. So you're coming into this role with a very deep appreciation of how close you need to be to the executive leadership and the strategy of the next 5 to 10 years, as well as staying connected to the markets from where we get the labor, and understand what those are expected to do over the next 5 or 10 years, and recognize both of those paths are not set in stone. So what kind of leader are you going to be able to receive all that information and still always have a backup plan and be able to pivot when it happens? In a role like this, those things are critical.
Okay. All right. Are there specific skills or qualities you believe are crucial for success in your field?
What we're doing now, when you get to senior director levels, global director, vice president levels in the company, the skills are, I believe, more transferable. Sure, you should have the functional or business knowledge and background, but that's what you spend your first 20 years doing and getting. When you get to this level, it's really about being able to articulate the vision and the strategy to the team you're probably leading, that has to support the work against that strategy. And what I'm learning as I still progress through the leadership ranks, having that skill is truly unique. You can read slides to people and bullet points, but that is not communicating and articulating a strategy. You've got to be able to tell the story of where we are and where we're going, and then look at your team members both as team and individuals, and help them tap into where they fit in that story, and how are they going to bring their best skills and competencies to bear to contribute to that story. And then the other skills that maybe need some development, how are we going to work that in too? I think the best leaders who lead their organizations that way and lead their other leaders, inspire their next level leaders who are truly owning the operational and tactical levels of the organization, are what's the driving engines in companies being successful. If you can't do that as a senior and executive leader, you are missing a huge piece of the puzzle that the rest of the organization needs for that inspiration and that value delivery. So it becomes a transferable skill, but it's also a skill to be able to join a new team and go to a different part of the company, because at this level, we should be easily transplantable, right, to where we're most needed.
Right.
If you can't do those things and you get dropped in accounting or human resources or R&D, but maybe you grew up as an engineer or a supply chain professional or an IT professional, maybe, just maybe, that role in influencing all those different people may not be the best fit for you. And of course, there are other things for people who have that seniority level and that level of experience to go and do, but leading people maybe not be one of them.
Okay.
To hear more about the slow burn with Lisa Williams, keep an eye out for part 2.